He should not have said it out loud. But once the words left my mouth, there was no taking them back. I'm not marrying a stranger just because you're desperate. The woman standing in my barn didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just looked at me like she had already expected that answer. Then she said something that made the air in my chest feel heavier. If you walk away tonight, she said quietly, hundreds of farmers will lose their land tomorrow. That sentence didn't belong in my barn, not between the smell of diesel and hay, not between a rusted tractor and a stack of feed bags, and definitely not coming from a woman in a tailored blazer who looked like she had stepped out of a boardroom instead of onto Nebraska dirt. I wiped grease from my hands and stared at her. "You're gonna have to explain that," I said. She took one slow breath. "My name is Claire Whitmore." That name landed harder than I expected. Anyone who owned land in western Nebraska knew it. The Whitmore Group wasn't just big. It was the biggest agricultural corporation in the state. Grain distribution, seed patents, processing plants, thousands of acres. The kind of company small farmers like my parents used to argue about at the dinner table. And now their granddaughter was standing in my barn asking me to marry her. I crossed my arms. "Let me guess," I said. "Some kind of business stunt?" Her eyes didn't move from mine. "My grandfather's will." She pulled a thick folder from her bag and held it out. "If I'm not legally married by midnight tomorrow," she said, "control of Whitmore Group transfers to my cousin." I didn't take the folder. "Then marry someone you actually know." Her voice stayed calm. "My fiancé left 4 days ago." That got my attention. "Cold feet?" "No," she said. "Pressure." She placed the folder on the hood of the tractor between us. "My cousin Ryan offered him a deal. Money, protection, a seat on the board." I flipped the folder open. Legal documents, corporate letters, newspaper headlines. Whitmore Group Airface's board challenge. Another headline caught my eye. "Farmers accuse Whitmore subsidiary of land pressure tactics." I looked up. "You're telling me this whole company changes hands if you don't get married by tomorrow?" "Yes." "And you drove all the way out here to ask me?" "Yes." I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. "You don't even know me." "I do," she said. That made me pause. She pointed toward the fields beyond my barn. "Your farm borders one of ours." I knew the land she meant. 400 acres east of my wheat fields. Bought by Whitmore Group 5 years ago. I leaned against the tractor. "So you looked me up?" She nodded. "You run this place alone." "That's not exactly a secret." "Your parents died 3 years ago." That one hit harder than I expected. "You stayed," she continued quietly, "even when developers tried buying the land." I didn't respond, because she was right. The offers had come quick after the accident. People always circle when they think you're vulnerable, but selling my parents' farm had never been an option. This land was the last piece of them I had left. Claire watched my face carefully. "You refused every offer," she said, still not seeing where I come in. She stepped a little closer. "Not aggressive, just direct. My cousin Ryan plans to take control tomorrow." I stayed silent. She continued. "And when he does, he'll push through a land consolidation deal." "What kind of deal?" Quote, "The kind that forces small farmers to sell." That made my jaw tighten. I had seen that tactic before. Corporations buy the land around smaller farms, then squeeze them until they have no choice but to sell. Slow pressure, quiet takeover. "You're saying your cousin wants to wipe out farms like mine?" "Yes." "And marrying you stops that." "For now," she said. I closed the folder. "You still haven't explained why you picked me." Her answer came without hesitation. "Because you can't be bought." I almost smiled at that. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She looked around the barn. The rusted tools. The old tractor my dad bought used 15 years ago. The patched fences outside. "You've had 3 offers from development companies," she said. "Each one worth more than this farm makes in 10 years. Quote. I blinked. "How do you know that?" I did my homework. The barn went quiet for a moment. Then I asked the real question. "So what exactly are you asking me to do?" Her voice stayed steady. "A legal marriage." "Just on paper?" "Yes." "How long?" Until the board confirms my position. And then we can quietly end it." I looked at her for a long moment. The wind outside rattled the barn door. A loose chain clinked softly against the tractor. Everything about this situation felt unreal. A corporate heiress asking a dirt-covered farmer to save her company. "Let me guess," I said slowly, "you offer me money." She shook her head. "I'm not offering you anything." That surprised me. Then why would I do it? Quote. Her answer came softer this time. "Because if you don't, Ryan wins." She stepped closer. "And when he wins, farmers like your parents become numbers on a spreadsheet." That image sat heavy in my chest. My parents had fought that exact battle for years. Late nights at the kitchen table. Arguments about contracts. About protecting independent land. I rubbed the back of my neck. "This is crazy." "Yes," she said simply, "and dangerous." "Also yes." I looked at her again. She looked tired. Not weak. Just someone who hadn't slept in days. "You understand what people will think, right?" I said. "That I married you for money." "I know." "That I'm your pawn." "I know." "And if your cousin comes after me?" Her answer came without hesitation. "I'll stand beside you." The way she said it didn't sound like a promise made for convenience. It sounded like a vow. I walked past her toward the open barn door. The field stretched out under the evening sky. Corn stubble, long dirt roads. The farm my parents built with their hands. If Ryan Whitmore really planned what she said, farms like mine wouldn't survive it. I turned back toward her. "There are conditions." She straightened slightly. "Name them." "If I agree to this," I said, "there are no lies between us." She nodded. "Agreed." "And if this thing becomes real?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" I held her gaze. "I'm not pretending to be someone's husband." Quote. The barn felt very quiet. "If I marry you," I said slowly, "it's because we both choose it." For the first time since she arrived. Claire Whitmore looked surprised. Not scared, not defensive, just caught off guard. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Small, honest. "Deal," she said. She held out her hand. I looked down at it. Clean skin, steady fingers, a life completely different from mine. I took her hand anyway. Her palm was cool against my rough one. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. "We should leave early tomorrow." "Why?" Her eyes didn't move from mine. "Because my cousin already hired investigators." The wind pushed through the barn. The old chain rattled again. "If they prove our marriage is fake," she said quietly, "everything collapses." She took a slow breath. "So tell me something honestly, Ethan." Her voice lowered just a little. "Are you about to save my company or ruin both of our lives?" Morning came faster than I expected. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw two things. My parents sitting at the kitchen table arguing about land contracts. And Claire Whitmore standing in my barn asking me to marry her like it was the most normal request in the world. By the time the sky started turning gray outside my window, I gave up on sleep. I pulled on my boots and stepped onto the porch. Cold air, quiet fields. The same farm I had woken up on every morning for 3 years. Only this time, something felt different. Because today I wasn't just feeding cattle and fixing fences. Today I was getting married to a woman I had known for less than 12 hours. A black SUV rolled into the driveway just as the sun broke over the horizon, right on time. Claire stepped out, dressed simpler than yesterday. No blazer. Just jeans, boots, and a plain jacket. But there was still something about her posture that gave away the boardroom world she came from. Focused, controlled, always thinking 3 moves ahead. She walked toward the porch. "You ready?" she asked. I leaned against the railing. "That depends." "On what?" "If you're still sure about this." Quote. Her eyes didn't hesitate. "I am." I studied her for a moment. "You don't look scared." "Oh, I am," she said. That answer surprised me. Then why do it? Quote. She looked out at the fields. Because some things are worth being scared for. That sentence sat in the quiet air between us. Then I nodded once. All right. The drive into town felt strangely calm. The road cut through miles of open land, cornfields, windbreak trees, the kind of view that makes Nebraska feel bigger than most people realize. Claire drove. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the fields pass by. Neither of us talked much. Not because it was awkward. Because we both understood what this moment meant. Two strangers heading to a courthouse to sign a document that could change both of our lives. After 20 minutes, Claire finally spoke. My lawyer will meet us there. Already arranged? Yes. You move fast. I don't have the luxury of moving slow. Fair enough. We pulled into the parking lot of the Scottsbluff County Courthouse just after 8. It wasn't impressive. Just an old brick building with flags out front and a few pickup trucks scattered in the lot. The kind of place where people file paperwork, argue over property lines, and get married on a random Tuesday morning. Claire's lawyer was already waiting. Tall guy. Gray suit. Professional smile. He introduced himself as Daniel Hart. Miss Whitmore, he said politely. Mr. Miller. I shook his hand. His grip was firm but careful, like someone who knew how to measure people quickly. You sure about this? He asked Claire quietly. Yes. He glanced at me. And you? I answered the same way. Yes. He gave one small nod. Then the paperwork started. Forms, identification, signatures, more signatures. I never thought marriage would involve this many documents. Claire handled most of it with practiced ease. Corporate life probably trained her for paperwork like this. Meanwhile, my neighbor Tom walked in halfway through the process, looking confused. He was still wearing his feed store hat. You said you needed a witness, he told me. I did. You can explain why. Later, quote. Tom scratched his beard. You in trouble? Not yet. The judge arrived 10 minutes later, older man, kind eyes. The kind of judge who had probably married half the couples in this county. He looked between Claire and me. You two ready? Claire glanced at me briefly. I nodded. The ceremony itself took less than 3 minutes. No music, no flowers. Just a quiet office and a few simple words. Do you take? Yes. Yes. Sign here, shake the judge's hand. Just like that, it was done. Claire Whitmore became Claire Miller. The realization hit me a second later. Wife. That word felt strange in my head. We walked outside into the morning sunlight. Tom stood there blinking at us. You two serious? He asked. Claire smiled politely. Very. Tom looked at me. You got married before breakfast? Looks like it. He shook his head slowly. Well, I'll be damned. Claire's lawyer checked his watch. I'll file the documentation immediately, he said. The board will receive confirmation today. Claire nodded. Thank you, Daniel. Then he left. Just like that, which meant it was suddenly just the two of us again, standing in the courthouse parking lot. Married. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then Claire exhaled slowly. That part is done. I leaned against the truck. You look relieved. I am. But? She looked at me. But the real fight starts now. That didn't sound comforting. We drove back toward the farm late in the afternoon. Claire had spent most of the day on calls with lawyers and board members. Her voice was sharp, professional, completely different from the quiet woman who stood in my barn last night. When she hung up the final call, she stared out the window for a long moment. What happens now? I asked. Now Ryan tries to destroy us. She said it like a weather forecast, matter of fact. Investigators? I asked. Yes. What are they looking for? Proof our marriage is fake. Well, I said, that might be tricky. She turned toward me. Why? Because you're moving in. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. I am? Yes. Why? Because married couples usually live in the same house. Quote, understanding crossed her face. That makes sense. There's also something else. What? I looked at her. If this thing is going to survive scrutiny. Yes? We act like it's real. Her expression softened slightly. That's not a problem. We reached the farm just as the sun dipped low over the fields. The house looked the same as always. White paint, old wooden porch, my dad's wind chime still hanging beside the door. Claire stepped out of the SUV and looked around quietly. "This place is beautiful," she said. "It's a lot of work." "I can imagine." I grabbed one of her suitcases from the trunk. "Come on." Inside the house, the air smelled like coffee and wood polish. Simple furniture, old photographs, memories in every corner. I opened the hallway door. "This will be your room." She stepped inside slowly. It was my parents' old bedroom. I had kept it mostly untouched. Fresh sheets, clean floor. But the past still lived there. Claire ran her fingers lightly along the dresser. "You don't have to give this up," she said gently. "I'm not." I shrugged. They'd probably find the whole situation hilarious. She smiled softly. Then she turned serious again. "There's something you should know." I leaned against the doorframe. "What's that?" She met my eyes. "Ryan isn't patient." "Meaning?" "Meaning if he can't prove the marriage is fake." She paused. "We'll try something else." Outside, the wind pushed softly against the house. The fields were turning gold in the sunset. I folded my arms. "Let him try." Claire watched me carefully. "You don't know what he's capable of." "No," I said, "but I know something else." "What?" I looked out the window toward the land my parents left me. "He picked the wrong farm." For the first time since yesterday. Claire looked at me like she believed that. But a second later, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. The color drained from her face. "What is it?" I asked. Her voice came out quieter than before. "The first article just went live." "What article?" She turned the phone toward me. A news headline filled the screen. "Whitmore heiress marries unknown farmer days before control deadline." Underneath it was a photo, taken outside the courthouse. Claire and me. The caption read, "Sources question whether the marriage is legitimate." Claire lowered the phone slowly. Then she looked at me. "This just became a war." The war started quietly, not with explosions, not with shouting, just whispers, articles, photos. People asking questions that sounded polite but felt like knives. 3 days after the wedding, the internet already had opinions about me. Most of them weren't kind. I saw the first headline while sitting at my kitchen table at 5 in the morning. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other. "Whitmore heiress marries local farmer in suspicious timing." Under the headline was a photo of my barn. Someone had taken it from the road. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I set the phone down and walked outside. Because cows didn't care about headlines, the barn still needed work. The cattle still needed feeding. The fence still needed fixing. And honestly, that normal routine was the only thing keeping my head straight. By the time I finished the morning chores, the sun had fully risen. When I walked back toward the house, I saw Claire sitting on the porch steps, barefoot, wrapped in one of my old flannel jackets. Her laptop rested beside her, closed. She looked up when she heard my boots on the gravel. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. I didn't need to ask what she meant. "Yeah." She sighed. "They're gonna keep coming." I figured. She studied my face carefully. "You okay with that?" I sat down beside her. "Not really." "Then why help me?" I thought about that question longer than she probably expected. Because the truth wasn't simple. Finally, I said, "My parents used to say something." She tilted her head slightly. "What?" "That land isn't just dirt." I looked out across the fields. "It's the only thing some families ever truly own." Claire watched the horizon quietly. Then she nodded. "My grandfather used to say something similar." "What was it?" Quote, "Farms should feed families, not corporations." That line hung in the air between us. And for the first time since she arrived, the conversation didn't feel like strategy. It felt personal. Later that morning, she joined me in the barn. At first, I thought she was just watching, but then she rolled up her sleeves. "Show me what needs fixing." I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Yes. You ever fixed a fence before? No. Ever worked with cattle? No. You realize they weigh more than your car. She smiled. I'm a fast learner. So I handed her gloves. The first 10 minutes were rough. Wire cutters confused her. Fence posts didn't move the way she expected. And at one point she pricked her finger on a strand of barbed wire. Damn it, she muttered. I looked over. You all right? She sucked the tiny drop of blood from her finger and nodded. I'm fine. Then she went right back to work. That surprised me. Most people from the city lasted about 5 minutes before complaining about the dirt. Claire didn't complain once. She asked questions instead. What does this fence actually protect? Cattle wandering off. And if they wander, they become someone else's problem. She nodded thoughtfully. By the afternoon, we had replaced half the broken line along the north pasture. Claire wiped sweat from her forehead. I had no idea farming was this physical. I laughed. You thought we just sat on tractors all day. Honestly, a little. Well, now you know better. We walked back toward the house together. Her boots were dusty. Her jeans had a smear of mud. But she looked strangely satisfied. That night she insisted on cooking dinner. I should have stopped her, but curiosity got the better of me. How bad can it be? I thought. The answer arrived about 15 minutes later. The eggs were slightly burned, the toast was uneven, and the bacon looked like it had fought a small war in the frying pan. Claire stared at the plate. I feel like this isn't my best work. I laughed before I could stop myself. It's edible. That's not exactly a compliment. It's a start. She laughed too, and something about that moment felt normal. For the first time since she arrived, the tension in the house eased. We sat at the table eating imperfect breakfast for dinner and talking. Not about lawyers, not about the board, just life. She told me about her grandfather, a stubborn man who believed corporations should protect farmers, not replace them. He built Whitmore Group to defend small agriculture, she said. So what changed? Ryan. Her voice hardened slightly. He sees farms as numbers. I nodded slowly. That sounded about right. When dinner ended, Claire stayed at the table scrolling through her phone. Her expression slowly darkened. What now? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. Another article. This one worse. Local farmer marries billion-dollar heiress days before inheritance deadline. The comments underneath were brutal. Gold digger, paid actor, corporate puppet. Claire locked the phone and set it aside. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what? For dragging you into this. I leaned back in my chair. You didn't drag me. Quote, you didn't deserve the backlash. Maybe. I paused. But neither did my parents when corporations tried to buy their land. That made her look up. People will always talk, I continued. The only question is whether they're right. She studied my face carefully. And are they? I held her gaze. No. Something in her shoulders relaxed slightly, but the calm didn't last long. The next morning I woke up to something strange. Silence. No irrigation system running. That never happened. I pulled on my boots and walked outside. When I reached the east field, my stomach dropped. Water was flooding the rows. Not flowing normally. Flooding. I ran closer. And that's when I saw it. 3 irrigation pipes had been sliced clean open. Not broken. Cut. Deliberately. My chest tightened. Because equipment like that didn't just fail overnight. Someone had done this. Behind me, gravel crunched. Claire's voice came from the edge of the field. Ethan. She walked toward me, then she saw the water. What happened? I pointed at the pipes. Her face went still. That wasn't an accident, she said quietly. No. She looked across the field slowly, then back at me. I think Ryan just made his first move. The wind picked up across the flooded rows. Water soaked into the soil where crops should have been growing. I stared at the damage, and for the first time since this whole thing started, anger settled deep in my chest. Because attacking me in the news was one thing, but coming onto my land, destroying my crops? That was something else entirely. Claire stepped beside me. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were colder than I had ever seen them. "He wants you to regret helping me." I nodded once. "Well," I said quietly, "he just made the wrong farmer angry." Claire looked at me. Then she asked the question that had been building between us for days. "Ethan, are you sure you want to keep fighting this?" Quote. I didn't answer right away. I just looked out over the field. Then I said the only honest thing left. "I stopped thinking of this as your fight." I turned toward her. "Now it's ours." Quote. But neither of us knew yet that the worst thing Ryan planned for us hadn't happened yet. The fire started 3 nights later. I woke up to the smell first. Sharp, bitter, smoke. At first I thought it was part of a dream. Then the wind shifted through the open window, and the smell hit harder. My eyes snapped open. Something was wrong. I pulled on my boots and rushed down the hallway. "Claire!" Her door opened at the same moment. She stepped out, hair loose, eyes wide. "You smell that?" "Yes." Then we both saw it. Orange light flickering through the kitchen window. My stomach dropped. "Stay here," I said. But she was already moving behind me. We burst outside into the cold night air, and there it was. Flames. My equipment shed, the building that held my tractor, tools, spare irrigation parts, and the seed stock for the coming season. Fire climbed the wooden walls like it had been waiting. Hungry, fast. "Call the fire department," I shouted. Claire was already dialing. I ran toward the shed. Heat slammed into me before I even reached the door. The roof crackled, wood popped, and snapped as flames spread through the beams. Inside were machines my father had repaired with his own hands, tools he had collected for 30 years. I grabbed the hose line near the barn and turned the valve. Water blasted forward. I aimed it straight at the doorway. Smoke poured out thick and black. Behind me, I heard Claire's voice on the phone. "Yes, we need help immediately. Miller Farm. Equipment shed fire." I pushed closer, spraying water through the flames. For a moment, it felt like I was winning. Then, something inside the shed collapsed. A loud crack. The roof beam snapped. Flames exploded outward. The heat forced me back. My arms shook from the hose pressure. Water turned to steam before it even touched the walls. The fire department arrived 10 minutes later. But by then, it was too late. The shed collapsed inward with a roar. Sparks flew into the night sky like angry fireflies. I stood in the mud watching it burn, completely helpless. When the flames finally died down, nothing remained but twisted metal and blackened wood. The tractor was gone. The seed storage was gone. Half my equipment was gone. A firefighter placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did what you could." But that didn't make it easier. I sank down in the mud beside the burned frame. My hands stung. Only then did I realize small blisters had formed along my palms. Claire rushed over, her face pale. "Ethan, your hands." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." She gently grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the house. Inside the kitchen, she turned on the sink. Cool water ran over the burns. I clenched my jaw as the sting hit. Claire grabbed a clean cloth and wrapped it carefully around my palm. Her fingers trembled slightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I looked up. "For what? This happened because of me." "No." "Yes," she said firmly. Ryan escalated. Her voice cracked slightly. "If I hadn't come here." I shook my head. "Stop." She froze. "Listen to me," I said. "You didn't light that fire. But I brought the fight." "Maybe." I looked down at the bandage. "Doesn't mean I'm running from it." She stared at me like she wasn't sure what to say. Outside, wind rattled the windows. The farm felt different now, quieter, like something important had been taken. Claire sat across from me at the kitchen table. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she said something that surprised me. "I'll pay for everything." "No, Ethan." I said no. Her eyebrows lifted. "You can't just replace my farm." I'm not trying to buy it, but that's what it would feel like. She studied my face carefully. Then let me help. That's different. How? I thought for a moment. Partnership. She nodded slowly. All right. Then she said something softer. Your parents built this place. Yes. Ryan doesn't get to destroy it. I leaned back in my chair. Good. Why? Because I'm not done fighting either. Something in her expression shifted then. Not relief. Something deeper. Respect. The next morning, the investigation began. Sheriff Dalton arrived just after sunrise. Old truck. Coffee cup in hand. He walked through the burned shed slowly. Then he crouched near the ground. What is it? I asked. He pointed. A small metal container. Blackened, but recognizable. Accelerant, he said. Claire crossed her arms. So it was arson. Yes. The sheriff stood up. We'll run tests. Claire's jaw tightened. We already know who did it. Dalton looked at her carefully. You got proof? Not yet. Then we wait. Claire didn't like that answer, I could tell, but she stayed quiet. Later that afternoon, she stood beside the field watching workers assess the damage. Insurance agents, investigators, reporters parked on the road again, cameras aimed at the farm. Another headline would come soon. I walked up beside her. You okay? She didn't look away from the burned shed. He's trying to break you. Good luck with that. She turned slightly. You don't understand. Try me. Her voice dropped. Ryan doesn't stop until people fold. I shrugged. Well, he picked the wrong farm. She watched me for a long moment. Then something surprising happened. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a ring box. My brain froze. What's that? She opened it slowly. Inside was a simple silver band. We skipped this part, she said quietly. At the courthouse, we hadn't exchanged rings. It had all been paperwork, business, survival. But this felt different. You don't have to, I said. I know. She stepped closer. But I want to. She lifted the ring slightly. I know how this started, she continued. A deal. A deadline. A legal loophole. Her eyes met mine. But what we're facing now isn't legal. It's real. Wind moved softly across the field. Smoke smell still lingered in the air. Ryan thinks this marriage is fake, she said, her voice steadier now. So maybe we should prove him wrong. She held the ring out. My chest tightened slightly. Because this moment suddenly felt bigger than paperwork, bigger than the board, bigger than Ryan. You sure? I asked. She nodded. Yes. I held out my hand. She slid the ring onto my finger slowly. The metal felt cool against my skin. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered something so quiet I almost missed it. We'll rebuild. I looked out over the burned shed, then back at her. And for the first time since the fire started, I believed that. But what we didn't know yet was that someone had been watching the farm that entire night, and the footage they captured was about to change everything. The footage arrived the next afternoon. I was standing in the barn repairing a broken gate hinge when Claire's voice called from the house. Ethan. There was something different in her tone. Sharp, urgent. I wiped grease from my hands and walked toward the porch. She stood in the doorway holding her phone. Her face had gone pale. What is it? I asked. The sheriff just sent this. She turned the screen toward me. Security footage, grainy night video, black and white. At first it looked like nothing more than a quiet field under moonlight. Then headlights appeared. A truck. It pulled slowly up the dirt road beside my farm. The driver parked near the shed. A figure stepped out, tall, hood pulled low. Moving quickly, my chest tightened as the person walked toward the building. They carried something, a metal can. Claire whispered beside me, accelerant. The man disappeared inside the shed. Seconds passed. Then he came back out. He walked toward the truck again, and just before climbing in, he pulled his hood back, only for a moment, but it was enough. Claire sucked in a breath. Ryan. I stared at the screen. Even in low resolution, the face was clear. Ryan Whitmore. Claire's cousin. The man trying to steal her company. He started the fire himself. Claire lowered the phone slowly. Her hands trembled slightly. That's it, she said. That's the proof. I leaned against the porch railing. Sheriff say anything? Quote, he's already sent it to the state investigators. I nodded slowly. Then I noticed something else. Claire wasn't relieved. She looked tired, like the fight had drained something deep inside her. You okay? I asked. She looked out across the fields. For weeks I've been trying to prove Ryan is dangerous. And now you have. Yes. But she didn't sound happy. I waited. Finally, she said something quietly. I hate that it came to this. You didn't start it. No, she said. But my family did. Quote, I didn't know what to say to that, so we just stood there for a moment in the quiet. Wind moved through the wheat fields. The farm smelled like soil and sun again. The burned sheds still stood black against the horizon. A reminder. Claire looked back at me. There's more. What? The board scheduled the emergency hearing. When? Tomorrow morning. That fast? Yes. She hesitated. They're going to review everything. The marriage. The sabotage. Ryan. And if they rule against you? Her voice stayed calm. I lose the company. And Ryan? He takes control. I thought about that for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind for days. What if you let him? She blinked. What? What if you walk away? She stared at me like the idea had never crossed her mind. Ethan, this company is my grandfather's legacy. I know. And Ryan would destroy it. Probably. So how can I walk away? I shrugged slightly. Because maybe it's not worth destroying yourself over. That hit something deep. I could see it in her eyes. You think I'm destroying myself? Quote, I think you haven't slept properly in weeks. I pointed toward the burned shed. And someone already tried to burn down the farm. She looked at the ground. Then she said something honest. I'm scared. That word sat heavy between us. Claire Whitmore, CEO of one of the largest agriculture companies in Nebraska, admitting she was scared. Of Ryan? I asked. Yes. Of losing the company? Yes. She paused. Of dragging you down with me. I stepped closer. You didn't drag me anywhere. But you're paying the price. I glanced at my bandaged hands. Maybe. She shook her head slowly. You didn't sign up for this level of chaos. Maybe not. I leaned against the porch post. But I did sign up for something else. What? Standing beside my wife. Her eyes lifted to mine. The word wife hung in the air. It still felt strange, but it also felt right. Claire swallowed slightly. You know this could still fall apart tomorrow. I know. Quote, if the board calls the marriage fraudulent, you lose the company, and you could face legal trouble. I shrugged. Worth it. She stared at me. Why? Because the truth had been growing inside me for days, and at that moment it finally came out. This stopped being a deal for me. Her expression softened. When? She asked quietly. I thought about it. The fence repair, the burned eggs, the way she stood in the field after the irrigation pipes were cut. I don't know exactly, I admitted, but somewhere along the way. I looked at her. It became real. The wind moved softly through the porch railing. Claire's eyes shimmered slightly. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the exhaustion behind her strength. I tried not to let that happen, she whispered. Why? Because it makes things complicated. I smiled a little. Life already looks complicated. She laughed quietly, a small sound, but genuine. Then she did something simple. She reached for my hand, this time not for appearances, not for the cameras, just because she wanted to. Her fingers intertwined with mine, warm, steady, We stood like that for a long moment, watching the fields. Finally, she said something soft. "If we lose tomorrow." "Yes?" "I don't regret this." I squeezed her hand gently. "Me neither." That night we sat on the porch long after the sun disappeared. Fireflies drifted above the grass. The air smelled like summer. Claire rested her head lightly against my shoulder. No words. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you only get after surviving a storm. But tomorrow wasn't just another day. Tomorrow would decide everything. The company, the marriage, our future. And neither of us knew yet that Ryan wasn't planning to lose quietly. The hearing started at 9 in the morning. Claire and I drove to Lincoln before sunrise. The sky was still dark when we left the farm. Neither of us talked much during the drive, not because we didn't have things to say, because we both knew this day could change everything. If the board rejected our marriage, Claire would lose her company, and the last few weeks of chaos would end with Ryan Whitmore sitting in control of an empire. By the time we reached the Whitmore Group headquarters, the parking lot was already full. Lawyers, board members, security, reporters waiting outside the building. Cameras pointed the moment Claire stepped out of the SUV. Questions fired from every direction. "Miss Whitmore, is the marriage legitimate? Did you marry Mr. Miller to secure the company? Is this just a legal loophole?" Claire didn't stop walking. Her hand found mine. Firm. Steady. We walked through the glass doors together. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere felt colder than the morning air. A long table. 8 board members. Lawyers on both sides. Large screens along the wall. Ryan Whitmore appeared on one of them through video call. He looked relaxed, almost amused, like someone already confident he had won. Claire's lawyer Daniel stood first. "Thank you all for attending this emergency verification hearing." The chairman nodded. "Let's begin." Ryan leaned forward on the screen. "I'll make this simple." Quote. His voice carried through the room. "My cousin rushed into a marriage with a random farmer one day before the inheritance deadline." He smiled slightly. "That's not love. That's fraud." The word echoed across the table. My jaw tightened. Claire didn't react. Ryan continued. "They have no shared history. No joint finances. No real relationship." He leaned back. "This marriage is a business arrangement." The chairman turned toward Claire. "Your response?" She stood slowly, calm, collected. "I won't lie to you," she said. "This marriage did begin because of the deadline." Ryan smiled wider, but Claire wasn't finished. "I needed to protect my grandfather's company." The room stayed silent. Then she looked around the table. But something changed. Ryan scoffed. "Oh, please." Claire ignored him. "I came to Ethan's farm expecting a contract." Her voice softened slightly. What I found instead was a man who refused money, refused lies, and refused to treat marriage like a transaction. A few board members shifted in their seats. Claire continued. "Ethan Miller built his life protecting land his family fought to keep." She glanced at me briefly. "And somewhere along the way," she took a slow breath, "I fell in love with him." Ryan laughed loudly through the screen. "That's adorable." He leaned forward, but completely irrelevant. Daniel stepped forward beside Claire. "Actually," he said calmly, "we have something relevant." The screen behind him flickered. Security footage appeared. Ryan's smile faded. The grainy video played. The truck, the shed, the hooded figure. Then, the moment the hood dropped, Ryan's face filled the screen. Silence slammed into the room. Ryan's voice came sharp. "That's fake." Daniel clicked another file. Audio recording. Ryan's voice again. Clear this time. "Burn the equipment. Pressure the farmer. Make him walk away." One board member leaned forward. "Where did this come from?" "The sheriff's office," Daniel replied. "State investigators confirmed its authenticity this morning." Ryan's confidence cracked. "This proves nothing." Another document appeared. Bank transfers. Payments to private investigators. Payments to a contractor who had already confessed. The chairman's voice turned cold. Ryan Whitmore, are you aware arson is a felony? Ryan's face lost color. Security officers appeared behind him on the video feed. The camera shifted slightly as someone spoke off-screen. Mr. Whitmore, you need to come with us. Ryan stood suddenly. You can't do this. The video feed cut. Silence filled the room. The chairman looked around the table. Ryan Whitmore is hereby removed from all board authority pending investigation. A vote followed. Quick, unanimous. Then, the chairman turned toward Claire. The board recognizes your marriage as legally valid. He paused, and recognizes you as the rightful CEO of Whitmore Group. Just like that. It was over. Weeks of fear, pressure, attacks. Gone in one moment. Claire's shoulders finally relaxed. She turned toward me. And for the first time since this whole thing began, she looked like she could breathe again. Outside the building, reporters crowded around again. But this time, the questions sounded different. Miss Whitmore, will the company pursue legal action against Ryan? What does this mean for Whitmore Group's future? Claire answered calmly. But when someone asked about our marriage, she smiled slightly. This marriage saved more than a company, she said. Then she took my hand again. And I plan to keep it. Life became quiet again after that. Ryan was arrested. Several executives tied to his deals were removed. Claire rebuilt the company leadership, true to her grandfather's vision. Fair contracts, support for independent farms, no pressure buyouts, no corporate traps. Back on the farm, things slowly returned to normal. We rebuilt the shed, new equipment arrived, the fields recovered, and the house, finally, felt alive again. Claire's heels sat beside my muddy boots by the door. Her coffee mug stayed next to mine every morning. She still took board calls. I still woke up before sunrise. Different worlds. Same home. Almost a year later, we stood in the same place where this story really began. The farm. Wide Nebraska sky above us. Neighbors gathered under string lights. Wildflowers tied to wooden posts. The same county judge stood smiling at us. This time there was no emergency, no deadline, no contract, just a promise. Claire held my hands as we said our vows, real ones, not legal ones. When I slipped the ring on her finger, she laughed softly. Second time's better, she whispered. Yeah, I said, it is. That night we sat on the porch watching the sun disappear behind the fields. The wind moved softly across the land my parents left me. Claire leaned against my shoulder. Do you ever think about that first day? She asked. The one where you asked for a husband? She smiled. Yes. I looked out over the farm. You came here looking for a solution. And I found one. I shook my head. No. You found a partner. She squeezed my hand gently. And in the quiet of that Nebraska evening, I realized something simple. Some marriages start with love. Ours started with a problem. But the reason it lasted had nothing to do with the deal we made. It was the choice we kept making every day after. Because some promises are written on paper, but the ones that matter most are the ones you keep when nobody's watching.